It was spring, and I was alone at home one night. I had my phone in hand, video calling one of my friends and pacing back and forth in my room. I passed by my window several times, looking outside occasionally. At one point, as I passed by the window, I saw a person outside on the street. The man was standing there, facing my house, right in front of my window. I observed carefully and was able to identify that he was definitely looking at my window. I told my friend on the video call everything, and then I pointed my phone's camera outside the window, trying to show her the man. My friend told me she couldn't see anything because it was dark. She then told me I should call my parents. I ended the call and continued watching the man for a few more seconds. I sat on the bed and called my mother. She answered with a tired voice. After all, it was midnight, and I had certainly woken her up. To summarize, she told me I should simply close the curtains and turn off the lights. According to her, that would be enough to make the man leave, so that's exactly what I did. But after a few minutes, curiosity was killing me, and I had to get up to peek outside. I needed to know if the man had left. Now, the man was even closer to the sidewalk, looking directly at my window. That was my limit. I grabbed my phone and called the police. The officer asked me if the man was holding any weapon, and I said I didn't see any weapon. The officer then told me to simply ignore him. He said that if the man didn't leave within 10 minutes or if he entered my property, I should call the police again. He also told me that a patrol car would pass by my house to scare the man. So I hung up the phone and lay down on the bed. I called my friend again, and we talked for another 5 minutes. She told me I should check the window again. I agreed, and that's exactly what I did. This time, the man had gone away. I stayed there, very close to the window, and then I raised the curtains and waited for the police car to pass. It took about 10 minutes. I stayed there talking to my friend on the video call until I saw a police car briefly pass by the street. The car stopped for a few seconds in front of my house, and then the officer took out a flashlight and started to check the surroundings. The car left soon after, and the street was quiet again. That reassured me that the man had left. After ending the video call, I turned off my phone and jumped into bed. Lying in bed, after about 20 minutes, I heard a creaking noise coming from outside. I got out of bed and looked out the window, but no one was there. I lay down again, but a few minutes passed, and then I heard another creaking noise from outside. This time, the noise was louder. Bent down, I turned my head and looked at the window. I was in total shock when I saw a figure at my window. My room is on the second floor, so suddenly those noises made sense in my head. He had climbed up the side of my house, which caused the creaking noises. I jumped out of bed and ran to the window on the other side. I shouted for help over and over, hoping that my neighbors would hear my screams. Quickly, I called the police again and told them to send another patrol car immediately. The man at the window was trying to squeeze into my room, trying to pass through the small opening in the window. However, as soon as he heard one of my neighbors outside shouting something, he apparently gave up. When I looked at the window again, he had disappeared. According to my elderly neighbor, who had come to help me, the man had jumped from my window and run to the end of the street. The police arrived, and this time I spoke with them and told them everything that had happened. They assured me that they would patrol my house throughout the night and then return to their cars. I couldn't sleep at all that night, but I hope that man got scared once and for all and that I never see him again. One time, when I was still a teenager living with my parents, I was alone at home for an entire week. This was quite rare, as my parents didn't usually leave the house often. A wealthy friend of my mother had invited my parents on an all-expenses-paid trip. I was an only child, so I was completely alone at home. My parents' old house had a forest behind it and was on a quiet street. Only a few cars passed by that street every day. There was a large patio at the back of the house facing the forest. Between the forest and our house, there was a large garden. We even had a pool and a small fish pond in that garden. This incident happened on a Thursday night in July 2013. I remember it was a Thursday because I had talked with my friends that day about our plans for the weekend. I was on the patio, looking at the backyard, smoking a joint and listening to music on my speaker. It was around this time that the strange thing started. I thought I had heard a voice coming from the forest. I turned down the music and listened carefully for a few seconds. It didn't happen again, so I turned the music back up. As soon as the music was loud again, I heard a voice from the forest. This time, I turned off the music completely and stayed there, listening carefully for longer. There was a voice coming from the forest again. This confirmed that I wasn't imagining things, I was really hearing it. It was a male voice, and it said, "Come here." The voice was somewhat distant but not too far away. The forest was about 20 meters from the patio, and that was where the voice was coming from. However, it didn't even occur to me that the voice might be calling me. I thought it was probably some child playing hide and seek or something like that. The voice called again, "I need help." This time, I realized that the voice was too deep to be a child's, and when a voice is shouting for help, it's obviously always concerning. At that moment, I was feeling uneasy because I was really questioning if the voice was talking to me. I got up from the chair, went down the patio stairs, and walked onto the grass. Then I heard the voice shout, "Right in front of you. Come help me." The voice was indeed coming right in front of me, so now I had the feeling that the voice was really talking to me. Reluctantly, I shouted back, "Who are you?" And the voice responded, "I'm trapped. I need help." I replied, "What do you mean you're trapped?" And the voice answered again, "Right in front of you. Help me, please." I took a few reluctant steps on the grass, moving closer to the forest, and shouted, "Where are you? I'm coming." The voice immediately responded, "We see you." I answered, "Wait a minute, are you alone or with someone?" This time, there was no response. I stopped abruptly halfway to the forest. I had a bad feeling. I started walking back towards my house and the patio. I didn't even want to turn my back on the forest because I had finally realized that the situation was very strange. I went back to my house's patio, and the voice didn't say anything more. If it had been a real cry for help, the voice would have said something. It would have asked me not to leave or something like that. Whoever was in that forest realized that I was suspicious of the situation, and only God knows how many people were there. It could have been 3 people, I don't know. All I know is that the idea of being trapped in the forest doesn't make much sense. Did the person's shirt get caught on a tree or something like that? The more I thought about it, the less I believed it. I ran into my house and locked all the doors just to be safe. I relaxed in my living room for a few minutes, still a bit high, and I think that's why I didn't suspect the situation earlier, because of how high and relaxed I was. But then, I heard the voice again from outside. This time, it was closer. For sure, it was coming from the garden this time, not the forest. I heard a water sound. It could have been the pool or the fish pond. I ran to the window to look. At first, I didn't see anyone, but then the voice said, "I can see you," and soon after, I heard a laugh. That's when I saw the person. It was a man, or at least he was the only man visible at that moment. He was hiding behind the pool, and I could only see his head. It was too dark to make out his features, and the only thing I could identify was that he had long, dark hair. I closed the curtains and tried to ignore him. I thought maybe he would lose interest if I stopped paying attention. He was probably a disturbed man who enjoyed harassing others, so I didn't want to satisfy his desires. However, the moment it crossed my limit was when I heard aggressive banging on the window, right where I had closed the curtain, and outside the man began shouting for help. I screamed as loud as I could, telling him to go to hell and saying that the police were coming. I shouted and yelled countless times, trying to sound even crazier than he was. I heard him start laughing on the other side of the glass. Apparently, he began to move away, and his laughter started to fade as he got further away. I sat on the sofa, trembling and out of breath. I stayed there quietly for a few minutes, and it seemed like the man had really given up. Despite all that, I still managed to sleep that night because a joint always helps me sleep. But I still wonder if I would have handled the situation differently if I hadn't been high. Anyway, that incident made me afraid to stay home alone for a long time. I was 13 years old, and my younger brother was 7. We were outside playing with other neighborhood kids. By late afternoon, we finally went home, and the sun had set. Our parents usually went out once a week to try a new restaurant in town, leaving my brother and me alone at home. Most of the time, they would let us know before they left. However, if we were outside playing, they often left without telling us. When we got home that day, the house was empty, so we assumed they had gone out. There was a note on the kitchen counter confirming that they had gone to a restaurant. My brother and I went to the living room to watch TV, just like we usually did before bed. After half an hour, it was completely dark outside. As soon as I realized this, I heard the doorbell ring, followed by knocking on the door. At first, I thought it was our parents coming home, but it wasn't normal for them to use the front door, and it was even less normal for them not to have the key. They always used the garage door, so the chance of the garage door being broken and them forgetting the key at the same time was very low. However, I realized it was still a possibility. I got up from the sofa and went to the front door to see who it was. As I approached the door, I heard a male voice shouting. The man was saying that he was selling cookies with his daughter. This confused me, considering how late it was. I looked through the peephole and saw a man completely alone, with no cookie box and no daughter with him. The man shouted once more before putting his hand on the doorknob. I realized I had forgotten to lock the door after coming in. My heart nearly stopped. The doorknob began to turn slowly. I quickly responded by turning the key in the door to lock it. The sound of the key locking the door was very loud. Clearly, the man had heard and now knew that someone was inside the house. I waited for a minute and then looked through the peephole again. The man had moved. Now he was looking through a window, directly into the living room. He was staring at my younger brother, who had no idea what was happening. To make things worse, the man's new position allowed me to see a knife. It was on the side of his pants. I closed all the curtains and ran to the living room. I told my brother that we could have ice cream in the basement. I needed to keep him away from the windows. I knew he would panic if he knew what was happening. He agreed, and we went down to the basement. I quietly locked the basement door. We had our ice cream, and eventually, I heard the garage door opening, which meant our parents had arrived. Later, when my brother wasn't around, I told them what had happened. They were horrified and called the police. The police investigated the place, and the first thing they noticed was that the front door lock had been damaged, confirming that the man had ill intentions and wanted to break into the house. What he planned to do after getting inside, I have no idea, and neither did the police. The man was never identified. To this day, my younger brother doesn't know that this incident happened.